Suka, sukela. Tell me a story. Using stories to help children cope with anxiety in these challenging times. Our guest panel is a psychologist, a senior librarian, an OT, and several teachers. We hope that you will gain from their knowledge and expertise. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to everyone. Today gives me an honor and privilege to introduce Jill Willows. Jill Willows has a Master of Arts degree from the UKZN in Pietermaritzburg. She spent 17 years working in the field of residential childcare in Cape Town and Pietermaritzburg. Jill Willows is a prominent clinical psychologist in the Pietermaritzburg area. She has worked in private practice for over 20 years. She has focused on assessment and therapy with children and adolescents. Over the years, she has encouraged many parents to get involved in reading programs with their children. She is an excellent mentor in dealing with children who have anxieties as a result of trauma and abuse. Over to you, Jill Willows.
Okay, good morning to everybody, and thank you to Rosanna and Deb for their introduction, and for Rogani for introducing me and her kind comments, and to LITASA for inviting me here this morning. When Rogani approached me to speak to you today, it immediately sparked my interest because I think of my own love of books from childhood. I was raised on Winnie the Pooh and the stories of Brer Rabbit, and I loved the way that Brer Rabbit outsmarted Brer Fox and all the other bigger animals, and the Just So stories. So I grew up with literature in my home, and I read a lot to this day. My love of books continued when I had my own children, and I loved sharing books with them. And I was fortunate that a group of women in my community had already started a children's book club where we shared books. A number of these women were teachers, they were artists, and the selection that they introduced me to was absolutely wonderful in terms of illustration. And I know how those stories inspired my children and became part of a daily ritual in our lives. In my work with children, I use books, and I know that the ritual of a story at the end of the session is something that's a great comfort to a number of children. So I have a number of favorite books that I've come to use in the therapy space. And I also look forward to being introduced to some of the books that you use. So I'm hoping to learn from you here today as well. And one of my ambitions when my life slows down is that I hope to write children's stories based on some of the issues that I know children have struggled with in my work with them. So I know that storytelling has a wonderful tradition of instilling hope and building resilience. And so on to my topic. I've been asked to speak to you today about resilience in children in the time of COVID-19. About a year ago, I was asked to talk at one of the schools in Pietermaritzburg about the challenge of raising children in challenging times. And within psychology, and I think in teaching as well, we look at an ecological model of all the influences that impact on children. And a lot of these challenge us because they're beyond our control. But a year later from giving that talk, along came COVID-19. And at this point, if you were to imagine shark music in the background, it would probably be appropriate, because never before has there been such a disrupting influence in terms of every single aspect of daily living: community, school, medical, economic patterns. And it has forced us all into isolation and distance, which is exactly counter to our instinct when we are under threat. And under threat, we always want to pull together, but in fact, we've been forced to be apart. So this has disrupted absolutely every single way in which we impact on children and their lives. So looking at the pandemic as a threat, one of my most influential people in the psychotherapy movement at the moment is a trauma therapist called Janina Fisher. And she speaks about COVID-19 as the Godzilla virus. It's invisible, it's roaming our streets, and we live on the edge, doing our best to avoid it, but not knowing exactly where it is. This feeling of threat, whether we realize it or not, is experienced in our brains and in the part of the brain that's linked to our survival. So when the survival brain lights up, the thinking brain shuts down. And this is really important for us to remember in education, that when children are in the state of survival, they are thinking all the time about whether they're safe, and they're not really able to focus. And this is impacting on every single one of us, adults and children alike. What can happen that there's a whole cascade of physical symptoms associated with the survival brain. And that includes elevated heart rate, shallow, rapid breathing. And the question, am I safe, is ever present. So we carry this with us on a daily basis and in all our interactions. And there is an undercurrent of fear and mistrust. We're not quite sure if everyone around us is taking the same kind of precautions we are, whether they're sanitizing, mask wearing. So we're not quite sure who to trust, and the Godzilla virus is out there, and we're not sure when it might come knocking on at our door. The primal emotions that are linked to threat and survival are anxiety, anger, sadness, frustration, irritability. So we might notice more of this in our own interaction and in the children that we're working with. One of the ways that we counteract the anxiety of the ever-present threat is through connection. So that's the limbic system. Am I loved? So for parents, I think they very much have moved into their response to the safety question is to protect, and they want to protect above all. And I think no parent is exactly sure how best to do this. And in the question of returning children to school, this has been a real challenge because they're not sure if they're doing the best for their children by returning them, by keeping them at home. One of the other ways in which we respond to threat is to flock together. And in other great disasters in the world, such as tsunamis, hurricanes, the community is mobilized and draws together. But in fact, we're not able to do that. And that robs us of an essential part of healing, that's not being able to draw together, that in fact we have to be separate, and we're feeling very disconnected at this time. Responses to the survival brain lighting up are well documented. I'm sure you're all familiar with the fight or flight response, the instinct to attack, the instinct to get away, and the freeze response. Less well known is the collapse response, that when we feel hopeless and helpless, we may zone out. And this is something that we need to be aware of in our work with children. The sources of threat are well established. I think we all know about loss and grief. We know about trauma, and those existed before COVID came along. So some children had already gone through trauma, and they carry that in their systems before this additional threat. Traumatized children are unable to regulate and self-control easily. So for them, often anger becomes fury and fear becomes terror. So their responses are far more extreme. And I think the question of loss is one that is more than what we would expect in our normal lives, where perhaps children lose pets, lose family members that are old or frail. We're now talking about loss in almost every aspect of their lives. And many children have spoken to me about the loss of the dreams that they had in terms of what they'd hoped for at this time of their lives. So if they'd hoped to play first team rugby, they're not even sure when they'll be able to play rugby again. So loss on that, in that way, impacts on them in a very personal sense. Less well documented in terms of threat is the impact of change and uncertainty. And the brain also experiences these as threat. The brain loves certainty, the survival brain. And when we are feeling uncertain, that part of our brain lights up, that we feeling that sense of fear. dysregulation or feeling activated, feeling unsafe is also linked very much to disconnection. So children that have returned to school are finding it extremely hard that if they're sad or if they're having a bad day, the teacher can't reach out and comfort them or put an arm around their shoulder and do the things that they would expect that would soothe and comfort. So disconnection is something that creates dysregulation in children, and it's been something that's extremely difficult for them to get used to, that this feeling of disconnection. And I think it's also continued in the home place where parents have been trying to juggle the demands of work and perhaps online schooling. So although parents are present, they may be absent in the sense that they're trying to get on with other things. And this has also been difficult for children to adjust to. So there's Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, feeling very isolated. I can't believe I used to talk to people. And I think children are feeling very, very much isolated at the moment and missing their friends. But even when they're at school, finding that the friends that they expected to see maybe aren't there. Classrooms have been divided. Some children haven't returned to school. So the feeling of loneliness and disconnection is very real. Underlying the threat are pre-existing challenges and vulnerabilities. So we need to remember that some children already carried challenges and vulnerabilities. And I think of children here who had learning difficulties and who found online schooling extremely threatening and became very overwhelmed by the demands of trying to learn without their teacher present to explain and comfort them in person. So parents have been extremely stressed about the demands of having to try and get the daily curriculum addressed and finding that children just have major meltdowns as soon as work is presented to them. So how does it feel to experience this kind of threat? Well, many of us and children are feeling out of control, overwhelmed, helpless, threatened. And this can be expressed in feeling angry, inadequate, alone, anxious, sad, confused, ashamed. So there are a number of ways in this way in which this might emerge. So going back to my model that I showed you in the beginning, what do we do about all of this? And one of the challenges to psychologists, to teachers, to parents is to foster resilience in spite of risk factors, in spite of everything that's going on. Prior to COVID, recent advances in the neuroscience of child development suggested that policymakers, practitioners, and institutions such as schools needed to focus their curriculum on three main areas: reduce sources of stress, build supportive relationships, and strengthen core life skills. So what I've done to my picture there is lit up the core of the child, and I think this is one of the things that we need to be focusing on. So just in terms of strengthening core, from back pain to compromised balance, many problems are associated with weak core muscles. And I think physiotherapists and people in that world are always telling us to pay a little bit more attention to those muscles in the middle. So what I think we need to do in the response to the pandemic is to be building core and to be re-looking at our core values. And one of the writers I admire is Arundhati Roy, and she's written a wonderful essay called "The Pandemic is a Portal." And if I can just quote a little bit from her to you, for you. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through it lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And one of the challenges to connection and groundedness, which is one of the things we need to be working on in terms of safety for children, is a general buzziness in society. And this term comes from a psychologist that came out from the Tavistock Institute in London, and I was fortunate to attend his workshops. And he speaks about the fact that this buzziness in society robs us of connection, of safe connection between parents and children. There's less alone time, more distraction, more checking and rechecking, more escape and avoidance, more defense against thoughts and feelings. And I think one of the challenges of lockdown was that some of the buzziness had to slow down. We were forced into kind of just spending time with ourselves, spending time in our homes, spending time with our children, and having to deal with a life that was less buzzy. And I think that's maybe one of the things that we need to reevaluate going forward, and if we're going to look at the pandemic as a portal. So looking at resilience, resilience is essentially all the risk factors that weigh on us, and on the other side, how we offset those. So it's creating that balance. So we've spoken a little bit about change, trauma, challenge, uncertainty, disconnection, and loss. And what we need to be providing on the other side are secure relationships, core life skills, core values, and goals. One of the things that has been difficult in the COVID pandemic is to maintain a sense of control, to be able to set goals. And I think it's been very difficult to set long-range goals, and it may be some time before we can do that. But we can at least set very short-term goals and encourage children to have daily tasks that they can see through, that help them to feel that they have that sense of control. So just looking at how we build the core in the children we work with. And just going back to the work of Erik Erikson, he talks about this age, the ages between 5 and 12, as the time of mastery. Schools have the task of building competence in academic, sporting, cultural, and life skills, which is building the child's sense that I can. We also need to be building children's sense of contribution, which is that I'm more than here for myself, I'm here for others as well, which builds a sense of I am. So I am capable, I am generous, I can do for others. And in this time, I think that has built a wonderful sense of efficacy if children are encouraged to be generous and to do for others, to be able to contribute. But we need to be working with children in a kind of bottom-up approach. And as I showed you in the brain, when the survival brain is lit up, it's hard for other areas to come online. So although this may not typically be the role of schools, I think that schools are being challenged to focus on the areas that provide children with safety. So when children come into school, they need to know that this is an environment where I'm safe, where I have secure connections, and where I'm being encouraged to get better at self-control. And looking at long-range outcomes for children, in fact, self-control is a far greater predictor of future success than academic potential. So self-control is a skill that needs to be taught and mastered. And I know that my daughter, who's an occupational therapists are very good at working with self-regulation, and we have an OT with us today, so she may speak a little bit more about that. What secure connection gives the child is a sense that I belong. And self-control gives the child a sense that I can choose. So I'm not the victim of my emotions. I'm not a victim of the feelings that I have of my feeling unsafe. I can take steps within myself to choose my behavior and to choose my response. And this creates for the child a sense of safety. So self-control is control of oneself by oneself, and it's the ability to notice and choose our thoughts and feelings and behaviors in response to the demands of the present situation. So to do this, we have to give a child a language for noticing their feeling, to pause and notice how they're feeling. And that is the stepping stone to choosing the response. And when I am working with children, I've used the colors of the traffic lights as a way of speaking about this. And we speak about the green light as the kind of good to go feeling, where I'm in a calm, alert state. I'm feeling safe. This is my safe zone. I feel that I can think. I feel that I can choose, and I don't react. Moving out of the space, there's kind of a warning zone, which is the orange light, where I'm feeling a little bit unsafe. I'm feeling irritated. I'm feeling that my fuse is a bit short. And that's kind of a warning zone. And then the red zone is where they are feeling completely overwhelmed, either in terms of sadness, anger, fear. And so what we're trying to teach children is to recognize that orange zone as they're kind of moving out of their safe zone and starting to feel that sense that I'm not quite safe here, and how I'm giving them skills for getting back into the green zone, the calm, alert state. The other zone that we don't speak about so much, but it's very much there for a number of children and for adults, is the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that I touched on before. And that's where they may feel just shut down. I don't feel like making the effort. I just want to zone out in front of the TV. I'm zoning out in class. And we need to be aware of that in children. So sometimes the children who aren't giving us any trouble, who aren't reactive, who aren't acting out, are in a state of hypoarousal, which is also something that we need to be concerned about, that they're feeling helpless and hopeless. So the work of the therapist, and more I believe in schools, is to help to widen that green zone, help children to recognize that calm, alert state and what they can do, that it is within their power to try and widen that a little bit, to get back into that state. So safety within comes from techniques like grounding, breathing, and soothing. And I think the school day needs to start with some of these, feeling our feet, hand on the heart, breathe together, and rituals perhaps that are soothing for children. And one of them that I've heard of that was very effective with a little boy that I spoke to, who gave me the lovely word ominous for how he was feeling about getting back to school. He said it was somewhere between the green zone and the orange zone, and he felt it every Sunday night. And his teacher started the school day with a ritual of storytelling that was around his favorite story, and he felt seen, he felt heard, he felt comforted. And I think for a lot of children, some of those rituals that maybe are a little bit regressive, they're familiar from when they were younger, have been a great source of comfort, and they provide that sense of safety within. When I meet with parents, I always ask them, when do you notice your child losing track of time because they are completely engrossed in what they're doing? What calms your child? What soothes your child? And it's always quite a challenge for parents to think about that and to really notice that. But those are, for the child, their future skills for self-regulation and for calming, that they then know that when I'm feeling this way, I want mom to put on music for me. I want to go and sit outside. I want to jump on my trampoline. I want to build Lego. I want to color in, to have a repertoire of things that help them get out of orange back into green. Also for safety, we need to be providing containing environments. So with all the aspects of this life that we're leading at the moment, where there is so much that cannot be predicted, to have boundaries, consistency, predictability. Children find safety in routines, and they find safety in rituals. The rituals of meal times, the rituals of prayers, those all provide safety. And I think that storytelling has a role to play there as well. And secure connections are very important. So children benefit from having calm and regulated adults around them, and secure partnerships between those adults. So as adults in children's lives, we need to also be checking whether our own warning light is on and doing what we can to get ourselves back into our green zone. And one of the nice quotes that I read about this time is that resilience is not about how you endure, it's about how you recharge. So we all need to have those strategies for recharging so that we are able to be the adults that our children are needing. So secure connection is more about being than doing. So for a child to learn how to calm his body and mind requires caregivers and teachers who are able to be soothing in a way that works for each particular child. In terms of bibliotherapy, and I'm here to learn, but I've also found that books are wonderful in terms of psychoeducation. And with the advent of COVID, there have been a lot of free resources explaining the virus to children. I think they can be reassuring just in terms of providing a base of knowledge. Books are also wonderful for normalizing experience. Children who are having regular meltdowns are feeling bad. They're feeling like, I'm a naughty child, I'm causing mum and dad to argue, I'm frustrating my teacher. And just to know that those feelings are normal and what they're experiencing is normal is a great comfort. Books help children to identify and express emotions. And I know I've got wonderful books that I use to help children with recognizing anger in particular. They help children to explore values and empower choice. So those kind of stories where people are empowered and can make choices, I think are extremely helpful to children. And then, as mentioned, they provide familiarity and comfort. And we mustn't forget humor. And I love books that use humor and instilling hope. So I particularly like this little cartoon, which says, other than the constant looming threat of danger, it's a beautiful day. And this one, which is more important to us, the big panda, the journey or the destination? The company, said the tiny dragon.
Thank you. I mean, that was just such a wonderful overview and so much inspiration. And later on, I'm sure you'll be able to look at the chat and see what people have had to say. So thank you, Jill. And I'm going to hand over to Rosanna to ask her to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Deb. Our next guest is Chandra Naidu, who's our senior librarian. Chandra Naidu holds a master's degree in library science. Currently, she's the senior librarian at Pinetown Library, and she chairs the training committee of eThekwini Municipal Libraries as well. Chandra started her career as a school teacher librarian, and she has worked with children for more than 30 years. Literacy, reading, and information and sharing this is important to her. She acknowledges that books can be used not just for pleasure, but also as a tool to improve oneself. She advocates that bibliotherapy is a tool that has been used in public libraries for more than 50 years and is once again the tool to be used during this coronavirus pandemic. Over to you, Chandra.
Thank you, Rosanna. I'm just getting in my presentation. Okay, leave it there. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity for this presentation. This morning, I'm going to talk about bibliotherapy in the age of coronavirus. You know, I looked at various definitions, and basically bibliotherapy is the use of books in the treatment of mental and psychological disorders. Although many people think of bibliotherapy as being used by psychologists and other medical professionals, librarians have been using bibliotherapy since the early 1930s. Here we as teachers, librarians, and other individuals who work with teachers, we are all going to implement bibliotherapy and have been implementing bibliotherapy for a number of years. The underlying premises of bibliotherapy is that the story that is chosen by the storyteller must have characters in there that the child can identify with. It must be age appropriate, language appropriate, and culturally significant. Because children express their emotions through role play, music, and movement, the actual bibliotherapy sessions become a sort of a vehicle through which children experience a catharsis of sorts. Although children are better able to cope with their emotions, especially of the coronavirus in this time, we must also remember that adults, and because the adults around them can intensify those fears and emotions, especially because the child is also within the confined space of the home with parents and other adults. So this becomes a bit of an issue. Children, the entire bibliotherapy sessions must be dynamic and ongoing. That means that whoever is doing these sessions, whether you're a teacher or community worker, a weekly events or bi-weekly events are essential, because once you start with a therapeutic sessions, there has to be further opportunities, and these further opportunities will allow the child to think about the problem, to apply some of the skills that they will learn through the therapy sessions, and then to come back in the second session, listen to the second story, able to compare the two stories, the two songs, whatever it is. Group therapy for the current pandemic would be best, as children would learn from each other. Now, it is not possible to bring children together in a classroom all the time because of the restrictions, but don't be afraid to use technology. Sessions like the one we have this morning are very good as well. And of course, when you are doing it electronically, then adults from the family, the community will also be exposed to this and may start their own therapy sessions. I am going to focus more on the storytelling aspect of bibliotherapy, and I hope that what I have to share will be used by teachers, librarians, and whoever else works with children. Use the story as a way to begin a discussion on the coronavirus. That's important for the child. The story must be at the child's physical and emotional level. So if a child is 5-year-old, choose an age-appropriate story. The child must be able to associate with the character in the books. So culturally appropriate books will be appreciated, but I can tell you right now that that is very difficult to come by. Once the beginner reader begins to share feelings and motivations of the character, he will begin the process of assimilating, absorbing those emotions and those skills, and therefore will then be better able to cope with the fears and anxiety. The session becomes a success when the child improves and begins to feel safe, loved, and accepted. Once the story has been told, the child must be given the time to question, repeat, play act, or act out the situation. It's okay for a child to stand and dance about and say, I am safe at home, and sing and dance. We will laugh at the child, but in the child's way, he is expressing all these emotions. Once the story has been told, you would realize that some children may not react. And that is why a second session or future sessions are important, because the incubation period of absorbing the story, the essence of the story, changing behavior, observing how the people around the child, the adults around the child, will also react to that change of behavior. So it's important for the child to be given that chance to absorb, enact, and reinforce his behavior. There are various activities. Storytelling or reading is not the only activity involved in bibliotherapy. We provide information through the story, insight, and that insight basically tells the child that there are other people with the same problem. We stimulate discussion about the problem. What is coronavirus? How can I protect my family, my loved ones? And in our communities, there are often grandparents living in the home. The child needs to know what safety measures to take. We share new values and attitudes, wash my hands, wear my mask. And these are the rules of society currently. So the child will know that, look, it's not just my family that are doing it, but all the people on my street, in my town, in the city are doing that. We offer solutions, the same solutions like washing hands, wearing masks, and of course, displaying how these things are done is important. Show the child how the child can help. So the child will be getting household chores to do, and these are acceptable. So the child must be told that, yes, you will be doing these chores, and these are the additional things that you will be doing at home. The activities in bibliotherapy that can be included in bibliotherapy is the drawing or coloring of pictures. And here I must say there are any number of pictures on the internet. All you have to do is go and search. We can print these out. You can photograph them, forward them to your children in your class, in the community. Adults can retell the story. You must have a question and answer session. Sing along songs. So you make up songs and rhymes. Recently, I was babysitting a little child, and I started singing about the soap on my palms go round and round. And he said to me, Auntie Chandra, that's like the wheels of the bus. And I said, yes, my dear, but now we're changing the words. And he got excited. And we sang for over 10 minutes. We'll share if we have time later. Role playing means allowing the child to do what is important and dressing up with adult clothing or paper dolls. We also have children trying to do this. And we see that as they dress and play act, various things will happen. We do age-appropriate measuring techniques. For a little child, you stand up and stretch out your hands, and the two of you must not be touching. So you would be 5 or 6 steps away from each other. You sit on the crust that the teacher has marked for you, and other such techniques need to be implemented. The story session, once again, must be age appropriate. The person doing the storytelling must be calm. That's very important, because if you are not calm, then the child will sense that fear, and that fear will further intensify his own emotions. Do not let your fear and prejudices, your false misinformation take over the session. So before you begin the session, do your research. Ensure that your facts are correct. Stick to the scientific and medical truths. Whatever you say to the child must be duplicated or should be able to be duplicated in another website from another medical site. Let your face be pleasant, but if you are in contact with the child in the same room, then you must keep your mask or your face shield on. It's important because this statement for me is very important, because I don't think that we as adults accept the fact that very often our faces give away our fear, our disapprovals, and things like that. You need to choose a plain, simple backdrop for the session. A calm, as Jill said, the color green or blue is important, and not something that will draw the child's eye or attention away from the speaker. If you as an educator have a story spot or a mat, then you must use that, because some semblance of normality is important for the child. Props and teaching aids must be relevant to the story or the theme. Remember that stories and songs can be adapted. Like I said, I sang the little bit about the soaps on my palms going round and round. It's important the child gets a chance to be creative as well. Show the child or the children how you sanitize and wash your hands before the session, and how you sanitize after touching the props. So the child now knows that he or she shouldn't be doing this. Once again, remember that the educator has to be neutral at all times. There must be an emotional distance between the educator, the story, and the characters. It's very important that we have this emotional distance. The distance I am talking about here is that the educator or the storyteller takes himself or herself out of the story. You cannot personalize it. You cannot absorb the emotions and the feelings, or those emotions and feelings will be revealed in your face, and then the child will be able to sense your fear and therefore intensify his fear. So it is important that the storyteller is able to create that distance. If you're not sure that you can't do it the first time, practice again, practice in front of your family, your friends. But it's important that you get that correct. We need, in these times, we need to ask, is our stories being told in person or in Skype? And we have to be prepared, because when you are in a classroom, you have routine. If you're doing it electronically, the child's parents then have to develop a routine, and your routine and their routine must be in sync. There will always be other individuals present if you are using electronic platforms, and those adults can often hinder or prevent the child from sharing his or her fears. So sometimes, even if it's on electronic media, you can ask the parents or the adults to give the child that opportunity to have an open and free discussion with you, who is the educator or the counselor. If the educator is doing an in-person session, certain protocols must be taught to the child. You put up your hand, you must sit 2 meters apart, and so on and so forth. I'm not going into that detail. Parents and caregivers must be asked to leave the room. We've discussed that already. However, if an electronic or social platform is being used, such a request may be difficult, and this can be circumvented by addressing the parents and caregivers before the session. For libraries, there are a number of key resources. What do we read? Many books have been written and illustrated, and we need to choose appropriate ones for the children. I found this to be a very lovely book for children, and I found the illustrations very relevant. There is an address, and Debbie, you can forward these slides later. I came across a number of books, but I just want to focus on one or two right now. We have the YouTube book from the IASC website. It's in various languages. English is one of them. And this is a very age-appropriate book for younger children. The Princess in Black and the Case of the Coronavirus is for older children. And it is an interesting book. You can download it for free. And it's freely available. There are many books and websites, I must say, at this point in time for electronic books, which is where most of us will get our books from unless we have the resources to buy online. So as teachers, we can download these books and share it with our children. We know that libraries are closed at the moment, and we are not sure when we are going to open again. And I have a list of books. The Decoder website has 12 books there, all very good books and information-rich books for children. PJ Learns About COVID is a good book. Kids Talk COVID Safety is important because we hear kids' voices. Bop and Pop series are quite nice. They have music that goes along with it. These other websites have a number of different stories. There's Anna and the Germ that came to visit is one of them here. And you will find that there is even a book that is called The Yucky Germ listed on this. The illustrations and the story is done by children themselves. There are more YouTube resources available here for you. There is one that I'm going to draw your attention to, and that's the Singapore Unitas one. It is school children who have written and produced a song, and it's absolutely lovely to look at the way the children present the song. The use of color in pictures, cartoons, and comic strips, there are any number of them available on the internet, and I would ask that you please Google these terms, coronavirus for children coloring pictures, and you would have hundreds of pictures, and you can choose what you want the child to use. There's also coronavirus for children comics, and you will get comic strips that come up. And these are extremely useful for young boys because male children somehow or the other tend to battle a little bit more with reading. And I found that comic strips are a good way to hook them onto these. Storyberries have stories, radio, and TV. You can see Storyberry TVs there with book reviews. A wonderful tool for educators. Here I've got Audible Stories. This is a free Audible story site from which you can download the books. The NAEYC site is another important website that I've come across with Save with Stories, stories written by adults or children which can be shared. Local is lekker. This I came across. Nati Ngubane, a South African, has published a book, and here it is available on the site. I've included it. So it's a nice change because it's an African story told from an African perspective. UCT has Oki and the Virus. It's a story, and there is another video of an adult sharing, reading the story to children, and there is a quiz at the end. That's it, ladies and gentlemen.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for sharing. I'm going to be introducing our third panelist. Her name is Paige. I heard her speaking on the radio, and I just thought I have to get this lady on our venue, onto our panel. Paige is an occupational therapist with a passion for children. She's worked and volunteered in a variety of countries, including the Elroy Baby Home at the LIV in Lanseria. She works in private practice in Johannesburg, South Africa, bringing hope and love into little people's lives. And she's got some other lovely things about her, but I just want you to hear her favorite quote. It's "The task ahead of you is never as great as the power behind you," by Ralph Emerson.
Thank you so much, Deb. I hope that everyone can hear me nice and clearly. Let me know if you can't. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for this beautiful opportunity just to speak about how stories can make such an influence or have such an influence in children's lives, especially when it comes to emotional regulation and control. And what has been said already leads straight to what I'm going to talk to today, so it's great. So thank you for the intro. Yes, so I am an occupational therapist. I work at a private practice in Johannesburg, and we see children with sensory integration difficulties, developmental delay, ADHD, autism, learning disabilities. So that's kind of our range of clients that we see. And why this is just so important for me to be talking about today is because sensory integration, which is what we tend to focus on in our practice, is so linked to emotional control. So it's pretty much all the time that you'll find that a child who has sensory processing difficulties will have some emotional control difficulties. And this is because they don't know how to regulate themselves, which is exactly what was spoken about earlier. So yeah, I'm just so privileged to speak today. So I am not only an occupational therapist. In lockdown, you know, many things happened in lockdown, and one of them was that we started a partnership, me and two other ladies. We are called Strong Anchor, and we publish children's books that deal with difficult emotions or situations that children go through. So that's exactly what we're talking about today. And so I just wanted to introduce you guys to Janae Colby and Janet Peace. They are both with us today on the webinar, but they will be answering all of your questions and comments as we go along in the comments section. So if you'd like to know anything, don't hesitate till the end, just ask straight away and someone will respond to you. So that's what we do as Strong Anchor. And because it's so linked to OT, it's so great that we can talk about this together today. So because I'm an OT, we need to start off with an activity. That's what we treat with. So if everyone can kind of do a little bit of a stretch and sit up straight and get your notepads ready and all of that. And if you have a piece of paper spare with you, please will you grab that too. So I've got mine here. If you don't have one, it's okay. You can just do this exercise in your mind. Okay, so before we get into all the theory and things like that, I want you to take your piece of paper and fold it into 4 quadrants. Okay, I am going to just draw a line where I've folded it so that you guys can see. All right, so everyone should have their piece of paper now, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to write, just in one word or a quick sentence, what are the 4 most important things to you in your life? I know choosing 4 is a little bit tricky, but I want you to write 1 in each of the quadrants, just for me quickly. It can be a 1 word or something like that. Okay, so I hope everyone is done. So can you remember which one you wrote first? I want you to put your finger on that one so that we can focus on it for a second. So this is generally the thing that you spend most of your time on in general. And the last, the most important one, which is the activity we're going to do just now, is generally what actually brings you the most emotional fulfillment. So here's the activity. We are all going on an airplane to, let's say, Hawaii, because I've always wanted to go there. And we're allowed to go on the airplane now, post-lockdown. But this is the problem, is that as you're flying over the ocean, the pilot calls in and says, Mayday, we have a problem. We're going down, we're going down. We need to get rid of some baggage so that we can keep up in the air so that no one dies. So this is the thing. You need to get rid of one of these quadrants. What is it going to be? So I want you to just put a cross over it, whichever one you're getting rid of first. Then he says, no, that's not enough. We need more. We need to get rid of some more. Quickly, everyone throw off one more piece of baggage. So you've got to now cross the next one off. And now you're starting to think, well, there's only 4 important things that I could write down, and now I only have 2 left. It's getting quite stressful and anxiety-provoking, imagining being up above the sea and this plane is going down and you're having to throw out important things to you. But then the pilot calls in again and he says, I'm so sorry, everyone. We have to throw one more thing out each. Otherwise, we're going down. We're all going to die. So you have to quickly make a decision. Out of the last 2, which one are you going to get rid of? So that's a tough decision, right? Now what I want you to look at is the one that you first crossed out. That is generally the thing that you spend your most time on, as I said just now. Whether it's work, whether it's friends, whether it's hobbies, anything like that, that's the thing that you generally spend your most time on. Then for the thing that is left, so the one that's left is the one that you generally would actually get the most emotional support from, whether you said that that is a higher power, whether it's your family, your spouse, you would feel that that is the place where you can kind of go. It feeds your soul, you get the most joy from that, and it gives you that emotional support. So now I want to translate this into what we're talking about today, about children. So I want you to think of any child who's struggling with emotions at the moment. This shouldn't be too difficult. Someone who's in your family, your own child, a friend's child. So think about this person or this child, and what do you think their 4 quadrants would be if they were to do this activity? And who would be the last man standing at the end of this activity for that child? Would it be the parents? Would it be the teacher? Granny? You know, what would it be? God? Would it be another higher power? Who would that last person be for that child? Now, this is where it gets quite intense, I guess, is that this is such an important topic because whatever that child would need as that last man standing is that person or that thing that's going to feed their soul, that's going to give them emotional support, and that's going to bring them joy. So we need to make sure that if we are those people, if you are the teacher who that child comes to, if they can't go to their parents, if you are the parent that that child comes to, if you're the granny, whoever you are you bringing them joy, emotional support, and feeding their soul? So this is now what I want us to look at. So when it comes to emotions, as occupational therapists, we often get referrals from especially parents or teachers saying that, this child is struggling emotionally and we need help. And so what we would just do is, first of all, do an assessment. So we would need to determine what exactly is the child struggling with. That's the underlying cause to the emotions. So because emotions are very complex, there's generally two major underlying components to our emotional control and awareness. Generally, for us, especially in our practice and as OTs, we look at the sensory systems. So is that movement, it can be tactile, auditory, taste, smell, deep pressure against resistance. All of these sensory systems actually form a basis for everything a child does. They form a basis for fine motor skills, for gross motor skills, for becoming aware of emotions and controlling your emotions. So just think about it. If a child can't process sensory information properly in their brain, how are they going to be able to respond properly to that information? And then the second thing that underlies emotional control is reflexes. So people will argue which one is first, sensory systems or reflexes, but both of them are so pivotal to emotional control. So that's kind of what our assessment would focus on if they're just purely emotional. But then we have to look at emotions in another way, and we often teach parents this because it just makes so much sense. So if you're taking notes, this will be for you. So there's a developmental sequence in which a child develops emotional control. So this sequence is in 4 steps. Number 1, the child needs to first become aware of the range of different emotions. We don't just have happy and sad. There's excited, surprised, embarrassed, and shy. So all of these different emotions, they are out there and we do feel them. We just don't know, as a child, they don't know how to express it. Then they need to learn how to express this variety of different emotions. The third thing then is how to express emotions appropriately for the situation. And now this is where some kids really struggle. So for example, if mom says, I can't have a sweet, or I can't play PlayStation, I'm going to be sad. Okay, and that's normal and that's fine. But the 4th point and the 4th developmental sequence of emotional control is where things kind of hit the fan. And this is when the child needs to work on controlling these emotions appropriately. So not just is the emotion appropriate for the situation, but then controlling that so that it doesn't get out of hand. So for example, as I said, if mom says I can't have a sweet, I will be sad, but it's just for a few minutes, and I'll be able to identify that this is not the end of the world. I can't be sad for 2 days about it. That is generally where we see the problem. So now, because lockdown has changed things a lot for everyone, I'm sure we can all agree, there's definitely an increase in the experience of negative emotions amongst children and adults. Let's be honest, we're all going through it. So we all know that there's lots of different reasons for this. There's less social interaction. We're having, more stress, more anxiety, and a lot of children are not experiencing enough sensory stimulation at home, whether that's because they just don't play outside. Maybe they live in a flat on the 3rd story and don't have a garden and don't have access to toys. There's lots of different reasons as to why there's this increase in negative emotions. But I want to tell you a little story about one child that I see in therapy. She is just such a joy. She's 4 years old, just turned 4. and she smiles and she laughs at everything, and she wants to show you how good she is and how big and strong she is. And she's just always smiling, and she loves unicorns. So she's a typical little girl. The sad thing was that in lockdown, we started doing assessments online, and her mom was not able to afford it and wasn't really sure how it worked and all of that. But I just phoned her one day to check up on how she was doing. And this little 4-year-old, her mom just started crying on the phone with me because she said that she is so depressed, Paige. I don't know what to do. She's 4 years old and I just don't know what to do. I feel hopeless. And that's when things are very, very sad, because she was, from this happy, happy little girl, she was now not getting out of bed in the mornings. She didn't want to play at all. She didn't want to go outside. Her mom said that she was just blunted, like she didn't show any emotion. And it's so sad how something like this, that is a pandemic that no one could have, stopped, or we can't do anything about it right now, really, will affect a child so much. So this is now the thing, is that because it's been difficult for parents to get their children to a professional for advice, we've now been doing teletherapy, which is basically online therapy, and assessments. But now what happens for those parents and children who actually can't come to therapy? Whether that's financial, because at the moment a lot of people are getting losing their jobs or getting pay cuts, or maybe just the parents are taking on so many new roles now in the house that they actually just don't have time to get their child to therapy. So we as OTs, and especially in our practice, we just have such a big heart for children. Most medical professionals do. And we're not in the game to just make money. Obviously, we need to survive, but we really, really just want to help children out there. And so what we do is sometimes we help people out financially, or we'll give them a home program so that the parent can do the stuff with them at home, and we just follow up on that every week. So because there's such a gap now between, having therapy and those who can't have therapy, and how do we bridge this gap to help more children, that's actually how Strong Anchor started. So in the beginning, it was in lockdown, and Janae phoned me because we worked together. She phoned me and she said that, my goddaughter is really struggling emotionally. I really want to do something for her. And I said, yeah, there's been so many people on Facebook, actually, like in the community groups, who have just been saying that they don't know what to do. They feel helpless. Does anyone know how to help them? Actually just using it as a platform to speak what they were feeling. And then also we had a whole lot of patients' parents saying that they were struggling. So this is kind of where the idea of Strong Anchor came from. And then Janet came on board with us, and she does our publishing. So now we are a partnership of 3 ladies. Good for Women's Month, I suppose. So now what we do is we use this opportunity to help children process these emotions through difficult situations they're going through with children's books. So we try to capture the essence of the fear and frustration, especially with lockdown, which is what our first 2 books are about. And then to, kind of develop lines of communication between the adult and the child. So we intend for our books to be read by both adult and child, not just to give the child a book so that they can be busy so that you can work. So it's great for teachers to use in class because it's so interactive. So now we've had to find a way to help children cope with this emotional stress, because they say that prevention is better than cure, as we all know. But it starts at home. It's the way that we react, as has been said, to processing emotions that affects the child directly. So it's almost like a parrot. I don't know if any of you have parrots or have seen a parrot in someone else's house, but the parrot just doesn't say exactly what is being said and done in the house. So whether you're trying to teach them to say something or not, that's what they do, because that's what they've learned. So that's exactly how children work. And so we have to be careful sometimes. So what are the different things that influence a child's emotions? First of all, definitely the environment that they're in and the context they're in. This is a little bit difficult to do anything about, especially as a teacher or a therapist. If you're the parent or the caregiver, you can try and change this if this is the main issue. But we can't really do too much as a parent or therapist. Then second of all, the child's temperament. That's just a natural part of who they are. And so we can't really change that either. The third and the fourth things are two that we have such an impact on, and that's exactly what I'm going to go into detail about, how we can help the child through and how it links so much to our books. So number 3 is their exposure to different emotions and the manner in which we coping with things. So we can help them with that, because, for example, if I'm with a child and I'm only ever happy, they will grow up thinking, if I don't feel happy all the time, maybe something's wrong with me. And they won't probably talk about it because this is not what they've learned. And then also they won't know how to cope with these emotions because they've never seen anyone have to do it before. And then the fourth thing we can really help with is the feedback that they get from the environment. So this can be external things like your words, spoken to them by a teacher, a parent, grandparents, friends, and then also what they think of themselves. And this is something that we can't really have a direct influence on unless we are modeling this for them. So let's talk a bit about how do we then use these tools and the kind of ins that we can to help children process emotions and develop resilience. So because it's really difficult to figure out what a child is feeling unless they just tell you, but if they don't know how to express themselves and they don't know about different emotions, they can't really tell you. Many parents and teachers will actually just avoid the topic because you kind of don't know what to say. It's like if your friend is really struggling, you might not even just ask if they're okay and if you can bring them dinner or anything like that, because you're just not too sure if you want to open up that can of worms. And then other times we try to protect the kids, and we say that, I want to protect them, so I'm not going to show them that I'm feeling really stressed at the moment. And I want to say to you guys that this is such an important place to kind of change your mind around that, because how are they going to learn if we're not showing them? So we have online resources on our Strong Anchor website. Just so that you know, it's www.stronganchor.co.za. I'm sure the ladies will put it into the comment section. And I just wanted to show you quickly 2 of the resources that I've written at the moment is How to Help Your Child Process Emotions, Part 1 and Part 2. So this is really helpful, and it's kind of a bit about what I'm going to be speaking about now. So feel free to go and have a look. It's free to download and to print. So what it basically says in there is that we need to not protect and avoid the conversations with children. And we need to enable the child to build resilience when they get confronted with difficult emotions. Obviously, the purpose is then not to burden the child with, everything that's going on in your life. And there's some things that children don't need to know about. But we need to show them that it's actually okay to feel negative emotions. If we're having a bad day, it's okay to say that and okay to show that. As long as we're not negatively influencing their day, it's okay. We need to kind of make them aware that emotions are kind of like a pendulum. As long as we're moving through them, we're going to be okay. An emotion is not a permanent thing. But if it becomes permanent, that's when it starts to become a problem. We also need to acknowledge the child's feelings. This is such a big one, because what a child is going through is their reality. If they say to you, someone is bullying them, to them, that is the truth. If we don't acknowledge that, then it's going to feel like their reality is not good enough, or, you don't care for them. So if their perspective on what is going on is their reality, we then need to acknowledge that and help them to work through it, even if we think that they are going a little bit overboard, or it's not actually correct according to what really happened. We need to acknowledge that. Then we also need to give them opportunities to express what they're feeling and develop emotional language. So this is also one of the resources that we have in the back of our books. And I will go through the books just now so that you guys can see everything. But this is also for free to download off of our website. It's basically an emotion chart, and it goes through about 20 different emotions as to, what is the child feeling, what is the person feeling in the story, like was said earlier, and how are you feeling in terms of this topic that's being spoken of. And then you need to talk about what happened and what could be done differently. That develops emotional appropriateness and later on emotional control. So a little summary of developing resilience. We need to teach the child. We need to guide them in processing emotions. We need to give them opportunities to do so. And we need to confront those emotions and them. And this develops resilience in them. So just a note that this is not going to work for every single child. Obviously, some children have actual diagnoses that will impact this. For example, oppositional defiant disorder. I've worked with a few kids with that, and it's really tricky. So if any of you teachers out there are working with kids like that, well done. Keep going. You will make an influence in their lives. So sometimes we need a psychiatrist, a psychologist, medication to help the child, and that's okay. But in general, this will work for a lot of kids. So now you might be thinking, that's all great, but how do we actually do this? Because I love practical steps. I want to know in a list, like, what can I do first? What comes next? So I'm going to give you a few practical ways to actually do this. So the first thing that I would suggest is just, whether it's your child or you're a teacher, is just to say to the parents, I really encourage you to go and watch the movie Inside Out. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but these little characters are from the movie. And basically, these little emotions live inside the characters' heads in the movie. And you kind of get to see whatever the character experiences, the little feeling would say what it's feeling towards what's going on. And then the feelings kind of have a little bit of a rant, and we see, which one is the winner in terms of, this is really a sad situation. Sadness comes out more prominent in this situation. And so it's just such a cool conversation opener. Then we encourage children to write or draw what they're feeling. So this can be quite difficult and quite abstract, but with older kids, it does work very well. And we also have that at the back of our books. I'll show you from this one. So at the back of all of our books, we have a space for the child to write or draw what they are feeling right next to the emotion chart. So they get to draw here, whether it's scribbling colors or drawing a nice picture or writing. It's such a great opportunity for children to do that. And then we speak about a worry monster. So I don't know if anyone has seen this, but basically it's like a little puppet. And we encourage the children to, again, write or draw what they're feeling, even if it's a scribble again. Some kids like to tear it up or scrunch it up or cut it up once you've spoken about it. So don't skip that important step. You need to speak about it to them. And then you scrumple that up or cut it up and put it into the worry monster's mouth, and he munches it up and it disappears. So he now takes the worry away. Then also we have the emotion chart I spoke about in our books, as well as what was actually spoken about earlier. That's why I was smiling when it was spoken about. I just made this little chart, and I've used it with my oppositional defiant disorder kids. It's again the green, yellow, and red zone. So what I did, this was specific for a child. I just went onto Word and I made this. So it says, if you're in the green zone, you're good to go. So these are the kinds of emotions that you're feeling. And then what can you do? So you can learn, you can work hard, you can listen to your teacher. And then you've got the yellow zone, or orange, I suppose. And this is when you need to slow down. Okay, so you might be feeling very sad, scared, a bit overwhelmed. And for this child, he needed to go into a tent just to have some time alone, which we implemented in the class. Ask for a hug or get some water. And then the last one is the red zone. And this is when you need to stop like you do at a robot. So this is obviously when the child's very angry, when they're hurting others, or shouting or crying. And here they need to, it depends on the child, but maybe walk away, ask for a hug. Maybe they need to breathe deeply. So this is quite a nice activity that works well with children who will be able to understand the books. Okay, so reading storybooks is what we've spoken about before. The librarian spoke to us about that, Chandra. And then the most important thing for us as OTs is through play and storytelling. So play is the child's most important way to learn. It's the biggest form of learning, and often a child will play out what they have experienced, heard, or learned, and in doing so, they will be able to process their emotions. So this is why it's so important to listen to the child's choice of words and their type of play when they're playing. We need to then provide opportunity for play, and then we kind of can open a conversation and speak about how the character is feeling and if that's also how the child is feeling. So I just want to quickly show you the book, and then I'm going to tell you where you can find us, and then I'll be done. So we have two books. The first one is Monster in My Neighborhood, and this speaks about the coronavirus being a monster, and it's quite a cute monster. So I'll show you at the end. It's not scary. Okay, so we also have activities in each of our books. So this is a hide and seek, which the child has to find these throughout the illustrations, which I did. And then I'm going to find the monster at the back for you. So this is our little monster, and the whole book is rhyming. Then the child has a space to draw what they think the monster looks like, and then to write and draw what they're feeling and to discuss with the teacher or parent. And then our second book is called Monster in My School, and this one is about the return to school. So obviously we speak about things like the social distancing and, you know, teachers now having to take temperatures, wear masks, all of that. And then at the back of this book, so in this book, the child has to actually find shapes throughout. And at the back of this, the older kids get to crack a code to answer this question at the bottom. So it's very interactive. And therefore, our books are from age 3 years old up to age 10, 9 or 10, because they range from such a, you know, easy activities to more difficult activities, and the illustrations go exactly with what it's saying, and the book is rhyming. So these are our books, and if you want to find out more about us, you can go to our website, which the girls will pop on the chat, and we also have our free resources there as well as our blogs. So feel free to go and have a look. We're also on Facebook and Instagram as Strong Anchor.
Thank you so much, Paige. That was fantastic and just such interesting stuff. Really well done. So glad I heard you on Classic Radio.
I would like to move the vote of thanks to all for being such an attentive audience. Thank you to all panelists who have made a valuable contribution to uplift our communities. To Deb Avery, the mother of literacy in KZN, I thank you for taking the time to plan this webinar. Your passion to spread literacy in our country is infectious. We did have a lovely webinar. We had lots of information sharing. And I think finally what I would say is our social and emotional needs of children are important, and that will affect their cognitive development. So we as teachers need to get back to school and deal with the emotions of the learners before we try to get the cognitive aspect of learning. So important thing for us to remember is we can use literacy as a building blocks for learning. Thank you.